This is St Peter's former approved school in Gainford, County Durham. From 1940, it was an institution for troubled boys aged 10 to 15 until it closed in 1984. It now stands abandoned on the edge of the village. A recent discovery of sinister messages sprayed in graffiti inside the building has led to growing speculation online. Rumours suggesting that in the past, serious sexual abuse may have been carried out by members of staff on former pupils. This film is an investigation into whether there's any truth behind the rumours. I wanted to meet people who went to St Peter's to find out if the allegations were true. I spent weeks leaving messages on forums and posting letters. Eventually, someone got in touch.
So I am on my way to Derby right now to speak to a man called Tony, who actually spent several years in the late 50s and early 60s in Gainford at St Peter's. I haven't spoken much to him yet, but the things that he has told me lead me to think that he didn't have a particularly pleasant time there. So we're going to go and have a chat face to face, and hopefully he can shed at least a little bit of light about what went on there. Hi.
Hi.
Tony?
Yes, hello.
Hi, I'm Joanna. Lovely to meet you.
Hi, come in please.
Thank you.
Hi.
Tony has been researching St Peter's for a number of years in an attempt to piece together gaps in his own personal experiences.
I ended up in St Peter's because I come from a family of 10. It was a very difficult home environment. There was a lot of violence in my home between my father and my mother, so we ran away a lot, got into trouble, stealing things from school.
We talked briefly on the phone about the culture of sexual abuse that was...
Yeah, I was sexually abused 4 days by Mr. Darby, with an A, not an E. He used to come and collect me, usually after dinner when I'd be out playing. It was summer. The sort of thing he would say to me was that, did I know why I hadn't gone home, things like that, which I didn't know. I'm 10 and a half. And he would say that it was because they didn't care about me, because I was unwanted. And then he would sort of start touching me. He took my trousers off, took his trousers off, sat down in a chair, sat me in front of him on like a little, whatever you call it, footrest, and began to masturbate it, put my hand on his penis, masturbate him. He made threats, that I wasn't to tell anybody else. This would stop me getting less pocket money, less, just general bribery,
Like many young offenders institutions, St Peter's was run by the Catholic Church, under the control of the Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle. Tony requested access to their archives, and after a drawn-out process of several months, he finally received information relating to his time spent there as a boy.
I don't believe I got all the information that I have about me. I'm interested in getting some resolution for myself,
Some closure?
Yeah. Because I know I didn't imagine things that happened to me. I know they happened. But nowadays it's all about evidence and proof, and the people who've got all the evidence and proof, they ain't coming forward with it. I think it's too late for me. I don't think I'll ever get any, if you like, justice for what happened to me in that school, because I think the elements are gone. I think the evidence is gone. I think the people are gone. Particularly, I think the perpetrators will be gone. I think it's affected the way I relate to people, my emotional state, my psychological state. I think it fucked me up, basically, emotionally and psychologically. I don't let people touch me. I cut my own hair. I don't even let a hairdresser touch my hair, So it's had quite a devastating effect in terms of how my life's been. It's always there,
Yeah, definitely. We'll keep in touch with you and let you know of any...
Yeah, that's the main thing for me. All right then.
Thanks, Tony.
Take
See you
care.
later.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Ciao.
It only took the brief hour I spent with Tony to transform this story from rumour into reality. He confirmed he'd been abused as a child by someone named in the graffiti. My next stop was Gainford, County Durham. I wanted to see the remains of St. Peter's for myself.
I'm about to get my first glimpse of St. Peter's, and almost on cue, this kind of spooky mist has descended upon the town. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. God, it is quite imposing, isn't it? You've seen danger, keep out.
These days, the building has become a destination for ghost hunters and urban explorers. The locals consider it a blight on the otherwise picturesque landscape. Most want the building demolished, but its future hangs in the balance as the local parish council is in the midst of a battle between two companies who each own part of the site.
It's not particularly beautiful. I mean, it's derelict, obviously. It's a bit of an eyesore, and I can understand why the village folk are not particularly happy with it being here. I'm going to meet a man called Mike Stowe, who's a local historian, who I'm told is the authority on everything to do with Gainford. So I'm hoping he's going to be able to tell me a bit more about St. Peter's.
Can I get you a coffee or a tea?
Hi, I'm Joanna. Nice to meet you.
Joanna, Polly, my wife
Hi,
Polly.
nice to meet you.
I've got 3 photographs of St. Peter's, how it was when it was an orphanage.
Wow, it's much bigger, isn't it?
You were threatened with it if you lived in the village. If you don't behave yourself, you'll go to the naughty boys' school.
Mike's dad, John, worked as a maintenance engineer at St. Peter's in the 1950s, and as a child, Mike lived on the site in staff quarters.
Do you remember any of the teachers who worked there at that time when you were a child?
Yes.
Which ones? Can you tell me a bit about them?
Most of them were pretty okay.
What do you mean most?
Well, not all.
Which ones weren't?
Well, there were some that we thought were a bit dodgy.
Can you just tell me what you mean by dodgy?
Effeminate. Could have abused children there, yes.
Okay. And which ones were those?
I can't really say that, can I, on film?
I think you can.
No. Well, I'm not prepared to anyway.
Okay. Are they still alive?
No,
Do you know?
no.
They're not. Yesterday, on our way up here, we went to speak to a man who was in St. Peter's as a boy. He was sexually abused by Mr. Darby. Does that surprise you at all?
No. I think there may have been 1 or 2 people in the school, either teachers or house staff, that could have been that way inclined. And one of the persons involved could have been the headmaster. He's dead now.
Mr. Byrne?
It's suggested that he could have been.
Do you think at the time the other staff?
Knew?
Yes.
No. No.
You don't think they knew?
When I first started there, I overheard a conversation regarding buggery by the children, right? And it was directed against the man I mentioned before.
Mr. Byrne?
Yeah, who within months left the place, and that was the end of it.
And why did he leave?
I think things had got a bit hot and people had realised that it could well be the case that he was an abuser, and so somehow he was moved on.
Okay.
Mike confirmed that more than one member of staff could have been abusing pupils. Most notably James Byrne, who was employed as a teacher from 1947 and left as headmaster in 1971. I'm on my way right now to talk to another former pupil of St. Peter's who actually got in touch with me. He's quite keen to talk about his experiences, but he wants to remain anonymous. In 1965, at the age of 12, Robert was serving a 2-year sentence at St. Peter's for a series of petty crimes. The most serious was stealing a tin of OXO from the local shop. And what were the staff like?
Most of them weren't too bad, but any punishment, I mean, you would get slapped up. What they'd done, they just got you, and you had to put your head to one side and then they'd slap you full across the face. And you might get 4 or 5 or 6 of them, you know. Obviously we were kids and we were all crying when that happened, but that would be daily. There was one called Mr. Darby. There was lots of rumours about him, you know, but he wasn't a nice guy at all, you know. Everybody avoided him. I was never actually raped, but I know that it did happen on some occasion to some boys. You know, that was generally Mr. Darby. But with me, it was the headmaster, John Burns. He would send somebody, go tell him I want him in my room. And I'd go in and he used to make me take my clothes off, and then he'd pull me onto his knee and he'd start interfering with me.
And was he disrobed at this time as well?
No.
So he was still fully clothed,
yeah.
But you were naked?
Yeah.
And he started
He
touching
used to play with himself when he was doing it.
He was playing with himself
Yeah.
as well as you?
Yeah. And then he'd say, put your clothes on, leave. That was it. He never spoke to me or anything. But every time he did it, I absconded straight afterwards.
How many times did that happen?
Probably 8 or 10 times.
So quite a few times.
Yeah.
Robert claims he was abused by James Byrne 10 times over the course of a single year. Do you think this was going on to other boys at the school besides you?
I know it was. You never knew who. And they had a priest there, Vincent Duffy. He was a nice little old man, but he was very touchy-feely. He'd forever cuddling you and then be playing with your ass. But apart from that, he was a nice guy, you know. He never went any further than that. You just had to be learned to be quick on your feet around him. You couldn't get away with it these days, could you?
No. Did you ever say anything to the police or any of the authorities about what had happened to you?
Nobody.
Why did you not?
I don't know. I think we were all ashamed of it. Because they're all preaching all the time. It was a Catholic approved school. And they were forever going on about God and Jesus and church and all this, and then doing that. Yeah. You know, which goes against everything.
So do you think that the church were involved in some sort of cover-up?
They had to know. You know, they had to.
Robert did nothing to dispel the rumours. Instead, he confirmed he was sexually abused by Headmaster Byrne. He also suggested the resident priest, Father Duffy, behaved inappropriately towards the children of St. Peter's. So about a week ago, I sent a letter to the Bishop of Hexham and Newcastle, which was the diocese that were in charge of St. Peter's when it was an approved school. And I've just received a reply from the safeguarding coordinator at the diocese. It's not a great letter, to be honest. I asked for access to their archives, to any kind of archival information they had relating to St. Peter's, and they've straight up said no, which I kind of understand because they're bound by data protection, but there are some bits that they could have shown me that they obviously just don't want to. I asked specific questions about some of the staff there, just dates of employment, which they've kind of not answered really either. I feel like a little bit like they fobbed me off. So I guess the next thing to do is try and speak to Paul Young, the safeguarding coordinator, and try and arrange a meeting so I can put the questions that I have to him face to face. Meanwhile, I'd been in touch with a lawyer called David Greenwood, who specialises in child abuse cases. He told me that in the past few years, he'd been contacted by at least 10 people who claimed they'd been sexually abused at St. Peter's. I travelled to Wakefield to meet with him.
For years I've had people come to me and say they were at St. Peter's, they endured a horrible regime of violence and sexual abuse, but because the diocese have said that they don't have any records and that a number of these suspected abusers are dead, there's not a great deal I could do with civil compensation claims.
According to David's files, allegations of sexual abuse had been made against Headmaster Byrne, Mr. Darby, and Father Patrick Duffy. School inspection reports obtained from the National Archives also raised worrying questions about how the school was run under Headmaster Byrne. Inspectors would often raise concerns about the access Father Patrick Duffy had to children during the night. Elsewhere, it was highlighted that no external psychiatrist was allowed into the school against the advice of inspectors. The archives also showed that the school had a huge problem with absconding students. At the time, they were vilified in the local press and harshly punished for their actions. But I now know that for some of these boys, they had good reason. As Robert pointed out, every time he was molested, he'd run away, only to be brought back to Headmaster Byrne when he was caught. This is the one. I'm going to park in his drive. Hopefully he won't mind. I'd managed to get in touch with another former teacher of St. Peter's who agreed to talk to me on camera about what he knew.
Hello.
Mike Chapman taught maths at St. Peter's in the early 1970s.
So when you arrived, who was the headmaster?
It was a guy called Mr. Byrne, Jim Byrne. He appointed me, but within 12 months of me having arrived, he'd gone.
And why did he leave?
Well, as far as I was aware, he left because he had been interfering with kids at night, I'm afraid, in the dormitories. The matter was hushed up by what was then the Hexham and Newcastle Rescue Society. He just went quietly and nothing was announced. A new head was sought and appointed.
It was known between the staff that something was
going
going on.
It was known in the school, yes. Yeah.
And why do you think no one did anything about it?
I don't really know. No kid actually came to me and complained of anything, and no colleague came and said a kid had come to them and they were going to raise the issue. So I don't know. I don't know if kids didn't formally complain or if the people they complained to felt unable to raise the issue.
Would you go as far as to say that the church went out of their way to cover it up?
I think so. I think you could say that simply because the matter was never made public in the sense that it never appeared in a newspaper or on the TV.
Did the atmosphere change after Mr. Byrne left?
Yeah, I mean, the new head, John Farrell, was a much more dynamic person. There was a lot more consultation with social workers and so on. And I would say, by and large, the place became much more focused and much more professional.
Yeah.
Thanks for
so
that.
much.
See you then.
I found Mike and his wife refreshingly forthright and helpful. He didn't hesitate in telling me that Headmaster Byrne had been dismissed for molesting pupils and that the matter had been hushed up by the Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle. There it was, abuse victims and former teachers on the record confirming that the church, the institution in charge of protecting the vulnerable children of St. Peter's, was aware of sexual abuse taking place and made no effort to punish the perpetrators. In the following weeks, I spoke to more abuse victims that wanted to go on the record with their testimonies, everyone with similar stories of abuse they'd suffered as boys at St. Peter's. But each time they pulled out, often at the last minute. Recounting their experiences was extremely traumatic for them, and in most cases, I was the first person these men had shared the burden with.
So, I mean, probably we can come and see you tomorrow.
Finally, I received a call that sent me back up north.
Can you just start by telling me when you were at St. Peter's, what years?
Yeah, I went to St. Peter's in 1966 and got out. So I was sentenced to 3 years, and I got out when I was 13. Shortly after being out, I was returned again for another 2 years.
So you were there for pretty much as long as a boy could be, from between the ages of 10 and 15?
Yeah.
We've heard a lot about Mr. Byrne in the past and his behaviour towards students. Did you ever experience anything inappropriate from Mr. Byrne?
I did, yes, on numerous occasions. The majority of times, I used to just lay still and hope that he'd go away. Basically hope he wasn't going to kill me.
So what happened? He'd come into your room in the night?
He'd come into the dormitory, so he'd come to my bed and then start doing things to me. But he was actually appeared to be picking me up from the back sides. If I was laying face down, picking me up from the back sides and then putting his hand on my private parts and moving me up and down quite a lot. And that's all I was aware of. The majority of times, like, what I would do is I'd run away after and probably be away for a few days. But then when I used to get caught, he was the one who used to come and collect me. So I basically, there was no escape from me, you know.
This turned out to be a regular occurrence for 4 years.
Later, I spoke to somebody who told me that, and I think he'd been into a room where there'd been maybe a 6-person dormitory, and he'd been caught by the other lads in the room interfering with one of the lads, and they'd actually beat him up. Within 6 months of me being told that, I actually got sent to a detention centre in Kirk-Levington, and while I was there, he tried attracting my attention by offering me cigarettes, and he was working in a porter cabin classroom.
So you actually, after you left St Peter's and you were in a different detention centre, Kirk-Levington, you actually saw Mr Byrne there as well?
Yeah. Another similar institute, like the institute that he'd already been in, where there was a lot of young lads, young offenders.
Not only was James Byrne simply moved on to another institution a few miles away, but as I was about to discover, the system in place at Kirk-Levington Grange would have made it shockingly easy for him to continue abusing.
Kirk-Levington was a no-talk institute, so you couldn't talk in there. If you did talk, they used to give you the paddle.
So you were supposed to be silent the whole time?
Complete silence all the time. There was no talk. You couldn't talk on the night. You couldn't talk during your lunches. So I don't think anybody got to communicate with very much.
So you literally went pretty much straight from St Peter's to Kirk-Levington?
Yeah, within 6 months of me being released from Gainford.
Wow, and just moved on, transferred to another institution where he can carry on doing whatever he wants.
Yeah.
I had set up one last meeting with Paul Young, the safeguarding coordinator at the Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle. I wanted to give the church the opportunity to respond to some difficult questions about their involvement in covering up decades of child abuse. But as I was on my way to the meeting, I received a phone call.
Hello, Joanna, it's Paul.
Hi, Paul, how are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. I'll not be available for interview this afternoon.
Okay, and why is that, Paul?
It's on advice, and the statement that was sent when I first had the inquiry, that would be the diocese's view at this moment.
I've got a victim telling me that Mr Byrne, the head teacher, sexually abused him, was actually found, walked in on sexually abusing a boy, and then he left St Peter's and was moved on to Kirk-Levington, not reported to the authorities, not arrested, just moved on. That implies that the church was well aware of what was going on, Paul. Do you know what I mean?
Put those type of questions to me via email, and I will do my best to be able to respond to them.
I guess there's not really much else to say at this stage.
No.
Okay,
my
Paul.
apologies again for the short notice.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Okay.
All
All right, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.